a really exciting day for me to be able to co-host this with my good friend and working together now, so we'll just say co-working, co-hosting. But I'd love to start off and have Anders start us in a good way from the Menifee territory.
All right, thank you. Hello. Test, hello. I'm Boston. How's everyone doing?
Amazing.
All right. Hopefully everyone's staying cool. I'm from the Stoney Nakoda Nation here, just 45 minutes east. My name is Anders Hunter. Well, that's the name that they tax me on, so my actual name is Ambatapid, referring to the first star that you see at night, first star you see in the morning. And I'm so grateful for that name. Before we get started, if you guys would take a minute of your time and look under your seats, just quickly, and you'll notice that there's nothing there. And that's my gift to you. Anyway, I want to welcome everyone here to the great territory of Stoney Nakoda. Many years ago, our ancestors used this amiskwaciy Banff country as a place where we pick medicines and pick berries and do our vision quests. And, we hunt game here and do lots of fishing. That was our national park. But, colonizers arrived and kind of moved us off to the side and called it their national park. It's a little hypocritical, but I think it's funny anyway, right? Anyway, the song that I want to share with everyone, it's given to us from our friends out east, throughout the powwow trail. I'm a powwow singer at heart and a song composer as well. And, when we get together with other song composers, we try to share as much as we can from who we are inspired from and, and everything else that we pick up along the way. And, some of the other singers from the Dakota, Lakota, Makochi of Minnesota, the Dakotas, Missouri area, they all want to share their songs and give them to us. So they give rights to us so we can share it to everyone else in our territory and vice versa. So this song is basically a straight song, which we would call, what they call Daddy's Teachings, meaning it's an honorary type of song, an honors type of song where their drum group's father passed away, and then the lead singer, the song composer of that, composed that song in honor of his father. And for us, it's a great song. We love to share it with everyone here. So again, welcome to Banff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tinigi for the song and for helping me welcome everyone here today. I just want to thank everyone for taking your time to come and join us today to hear the words of my good friend Cheryl L'Hirondelle, who I've known for quite a while. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from La Ronge, Saskatchewan, which is in the Treaty 6 area. I don't know if any of you know that area. Have any of you been there? Well, of course. Yeah. I really love that area, so coming here, it reminds me of the same thing, but there's mountains. And it was actually this beautiful mountain that we have here, Sacred Buffalo Guardian Mountain, that really called to me and my kids over the years. So I have 2 kids, Delari and Corwin, who are 17 and 19. And it was actually their wish to come here. So we kept coming here every year since they're small. They're now tall. So now I'm little mom. And so our family originally is from Waswanipi Cree Nation, so we're Atikamekw Cree on my grandmother's side, but I spent a lot of time in Treaty 4 area in Regina, Saskatchewan. And so my dad who raised me is Plains Cree and from the Papaschase First Nation. And so coming today, I always like to honor where I come from and acknowledge that I'm honored to call this place home. For almost 5 years now. LinkedIn said 4 years, 10 months. So I guess that's an achievement. And so for me to be able to host and share events and to share stories is a big honor. And I told Cheryl that I'm going to start and share a story. I didn't tell her what story I was going to share of us. But when I was a young storyteller, so I started off doing a lot of oral storytelling through my mom. It was something we did around the campfire in La Ronge, and we did it in the summer, we did it in the winter, so it's a little different in Woodland Cree, where we tell stories when we have time of rest. And so growing up, I was able to translate that into different mediums. So film was kind of where I landed with my background, but I met this really wonderful lady along the way, and her name was Michelle Sarada, who had passed away many years ago. And the reason I thought of that story is because Cheryl gifted me this beautiful Saskatoon berry pie. And it was actually Michelle who taught me how to make pie when we were up in Cumberland House, teaching kids how to not only make films, but to dance, play, visual arts, and really enjoy life. And I think what Michelle taught me was that gift of joy. And in her time with me, she not only mentored me, but she pointed me to the Mackenzie Art Gallery because she said, you're a gifted storyteller, and they have an exhibition called Moving Forward, Never Forgetting. And as part of that, they need story keepers, someone who's gifted to be able to share stories, but not only that, who's able to listen and speak to the curators, speak to the artist, and welcome and host people as they walk through the gallery. They gave me a tea room as well, which was pretty cool. And in that time, actually, one of my favorite things to do was not only to host and have tea with whoever would sit with me and share stories, but there was one little corner where I could put the headphones on, and I was able to listen to the wonderful project of Cheryl L'Hirondelle, and that's where I was able to not only get to know her work, the work that she did that actually came to a very close place, because my dad that I mentioned worked at Paul Dojak, and so for me to see those talents come through that project really reinforced why my dad loved his job as well. And so we didn't know we were crossing paths before we ever met. In fact, today we were just realizing, while I was a little kid, my mom was actually socializing with the same people she was bringing up. So Bob Boyer, Ahasu, and so for me, these were just people that I grew up with. But then when I went to the gallery, then I seen them with their art, and so for me it was pretty amazing that I didn't realize that what my family was tapping into. And so for me to be able to welcome, because we have Wakotoan values, which is our kinship values, while I say friend, I actually want to welcome my family, my sister, to come up and to take over the podium with her singing words and to share in a presentation. As I noted to Cheryl, I usually don't read bios because we naturally, as Indigenous people, introduce ourselves when we come up. So just wanted to share that story, and you changed it because you brought me that pie. So I'll save that other story for our conversation later. So if we can give her a big round of applause, welcome.
All right, Rafi, I don't know if we got this queued up. There we go. All right. I always have my mom and my aunts with me. And I just want to say kinanaskom tanawau to Anders, to you and your community, and for this beautiful land that we get to be on, and all the beings that live here. And you know, I was taught by somebody that when we do land acknowledgements, like for each and every one of you when you're in somebody else's territory, you're supposed to feel it so profoundly that it almost brings you to tears, or maybe does bring you to tears, you know. And if I think about, you know, the many experiences I've had here for so long in this place, I'm just filled with so much gratitude that this is your place, and I get to come here every now and again. I used to come here as a kid, actually. Same thing. My mom and dad used to bring us here, and I learned lots of stories from my mom, because she would play this game with us. We didn't have a lot of money, but she would give us a few cents if we could spot an animal somewhere in the bush, eh? And then she'd have to verify it. So we'd have to like see it real quick, and then she'd have to look, and then she'd verify it and go, okay. And that's how we actually would get our candy money when we'd come to Banff. Finally, we had a little bit of money from what we won on the road. But she also used to show us old roadways, you know, and those were the old roadways before the highways were there, you know, and she used to talk about, you know, life on those old roadways. So it's in this place that I got to hear those kinds of stories. So another reason for me to be so extremely grateful to you. Hi. And I want to thank Janine so very much. I'm just so grateful. You are a beautiful sister. I really, every time you ask me to come and do something here, I just feel I have to pinch myself and go, wow, she thinks I'm okay. That's awesome. Because you know what the arts can be like sometimes, eh? You never know what's the luck of the draw, you know. So I'm just so grateful that you ask me here every time you do, and to your staff who've helped you, to Tanya, and to Anya, who couldn't make it tonight, and to Ali, who's somewhere here. There's Ali, and then to Rafi, who's doing our sound for us tonight. So if you want to give him a round of applause, just cause. Thank you, Rafi. Awesome, and I haven't forgotten anyone, I hope. I just want to, I have to click that. I have to keep touching my computer, which is fine. So this is my mom and my mom and my aunties. My mom's wearing the green top, and I'm always reminded that they've got my back. I have the same amount of uncles, so they've got a nice big family of aunts and uncles who kind of are always with me, and my mom always reminded me to remember who I was and where I was from. And in fact, I'll play you something, hopefully we'll get to it, I won't talk too long, and it's in her actual words. So I always like to bring them with me and just say this is who I'm from. Vine Deloria Jr., in the book, his last book that he ever wrote is called The World We Used to Live In. He talks about how a long time ago, that people would get their degrees, their bachelor's degrees, their master's, their PhD. You actually got it in the bush. You know, you got it living off the land. You got it by being in your community with knowledge keepers. And I think for everybody in this room, you could do that. You could go to your family, deep into your family, and find people in your family and your community who would teach you things with which to make a creative life, you know. And so I'm reminded of that because I was really lucky back in the 90s. I came to northern Saskatchewan to Meadow Lake Tribal Council to just hang out for a little while, really. There was Chief Linekus from Sagamay and Robin Brass from Papaschase. We're trying to start an artist-run center up on reserve, a place called wāskahikan, or English River, and they invited me to come from Toronto, and I said yes. And at any rate, when I went there, I immediately met my brother, my Indian adopted brother, Joseph Natauhau, and he and I started traveling. And then we got hired by Meadow Lake Tribal Council, and I should warn you, I come from a family that makes a short story long, so here we go. And we started working for the Tribal Council, but very, very quickly, the job that I had then for the next couple of years was to be a storyteller in residence. And the job was I got to go visit old people. Like, how rough is that, eh? Oh my gosh. So I really got my master's up in the bush. And one day, this photo I'm showing you is from a piece that I created called Chisti Mauino Otse. It means for the tobacco being. And it was because we went to visit this old man and he told me a story about how his grandfather's name was Chisti Mauino, the tobacco being. And he got that name because this was in the time when ceremony was outlawed. And if any native people, Indian people were practicing ceremony, you'd get a jail sentence. It was like major crime to practice our ways. So he covertly would go from community to community, and he would run and he would bring tobacco to different communities saying, there's a ceremony, a secret ceremony happening, will you come? And if people accepted the tobacco, that meant that they would make the journey to go to that secret covert ceremony so that they could still practice. Because as we know that those ceremonies are what keep the earth turning, right? And the songs that are part of those ceremonies. I know there's a couple composers here in the room, you know, those songs, right? So at any rate, he told me that story and it changed my life. I started dreaming about this process. And I actually, at the time, because I'd visited so many old ladies and ate so much bannock, I was like about 220 pounds, so I was quite heavy. And then I had this dream that I was running, and so I was like, oh God. So I actually started running. And, you know, over the course of several months, I just dropped the weight off and realized, oh, I have to make this performance piece for this tobacco being. And what was really wonderful was, you know, thinking about decolonizing the narrative, you know, that really was on a personal level, decolonizing my own narrative. And for that community, I know they were quite happy. There was old ladies who were driving past me as I was running. I ran a half marathon, that was the project. And they were running past me saying, ah, kamiyamo. And I know maybe Joy's here and maybe can understand a bit of my bad Cree. And it's basically they're saying, keep going, quit, you know, don't give up, keep persevering. And, you know, they were happy that somebody had come to their community and was honoring one of their ancestors. But I think maybe I'll just back up a little bit and just to say why performance for me personally. I know in this room there's dancers and visual artists and composers and I don't know who else. I shook a lot of hands. I don't know exactly what you all do. But for me, the reason performance art was something that I did early on in my practice was I went to Alberta College of Art in the 80s and I got kicked out after 1 year. And, you know, I just really didn't know how to be a student, and I really just didn't understand how to be in an institution. You know, I've learned kind of over the years a bit better. But performance for me, and this is a piece called Tongue-Tied. It's a very poor quality image, but basically what I realized was that there was a language inside me that was wanting to get out. And I didn't have the language. You know, my mom only would say a few words to us when we were kids. She'd call us liars, or she'd tell us, you know, she'd tell us to hurry up, or she'd tell us to shut up, or, you know, so we had words, but not a lot of words growing up. And I knew there was this language inside of me, and I started to realize that when I was kind of moving my body, and I didn't have any theater training or any dance training, so I knew that when I was moving my body in this kind of experimental art community in Calgary, in this work called performance art, it was a way that on some level, it was a way that I was trying to articulate that language, you know, that had been ripped away from us all through the residential school era. And so that's why performance art was something that I did quite a bit. Then later on, I started to kind of really, you know, while I was living up in Meadow Lake and hearing all these stories and hearing our stories about our trickster being, whose name we don't say in the summertime, we say wāskahikan, the name that can't be said, and there's another name you'll hear where you say that name in the wintertime. And the reason we don't say that name in the summertime is because, of course, you know, all the plants and animals will start going, oh, what are they up to? We want to hear that story. And so when you don't say their name or don't tell the whole story, what you're doing is the plants and the animals will keep doing their work. But at any rate, I started going to the United Kingdom because I was hearing these stories about this trickster being that would was essentially creating the land, like by their activities. And when I started going to the United Kingdom, it was a guy that I met here at the Banff Centre. His name was Heath Bunting. And Heath's a British guy who was known as being the person who created net art. And he had a pirate radio station here at the Banff Centre, and we became friends. He came to a native event. We did an Aboriginal streams looking at community radio, and he said, I like being with all you native people. He says, you're always laughing and having fun, And I just said, we're mostly like pointing at each other and teasing each other and laughing, So we became friends. At any rate, I went to the United Kingdom, and Heath and his cohort were really a bunch of anarchists, really, And what I really learned was that there's that dynamic anarchy, which is not about terrorism. It's actually just about how can we break the rules to make sure that everyone's included. And if you think about our trickster and our trickster stories from Indigenous cultures, that's what the trickster's also doing. The trickster's saying, how do we make everyone included? How do we create, So this is a piece that I did for many years traveling around, and it was inspired by Heath and his group. They would do, that urban, whatever that stuff's called when you climb around in urban places. There's parkour, there we go, that's the word. And but this piece I called it Climbing the Iron Mountains, because I thought if my ancestors showed up today on this land, they would say, what are all these iron mountains that you've created? And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to desocialize myself in time and space. And so instead of walking up the stairs, I would climb the stairs, but not climb the stairs the way you conventionally climb stairs. I would had a little rule, and the rule was I could only do the banisters and things like that. And on my back is a knapsack, and what I did was I had a pirate radio that I had purchased, and I used to scale buildings until I could get a pirate radio set up on the top of the building. And then I would broadcast on behalf of all of the winged beings, because we know that that domain is not our domain, right? That's the domain of the winged. And so I would broadcast on their behalf. And so that was a project I did for quite a while. And as you can see, it's more of this, moving my body around in time space. Because unlike some of you, I never got to have that material practice where I know how to work with paint, or I know how to work with, other things that you're all here doing. Also with one thing to say about Heath that was really useful for me was in the early 90s, and actually this was before I met Heath, here at the Banff Centre there was a project it was a symposium called Drumbeats to Drumbites. And it was a gathering of Indigenous thinkers from all across Turtle Island who either had some sort of propensity for technology or were starting to work in technology. And this was before the internet. This was before there was what we know as the internet. But there used to be, back in those days, if you had a 1400 baud modem, you were screaming. You had a really high power connection, and you'd have to dial long distance to some BBS somewhere in the States, and you'd get to look at text on a bulletin board, and then you'd have to disconnect or else you'd get a really big phone bill, right? So that was the internet early on. So this was back in the day, and George Baldwin and Randy Ross, who came here to the Banff Centre, they had coined a phrase to sort of get Indigenous people to buy into technology, into the internet that was coming. And they said, we don't want to be roadkill on the information superhighway. And so that was how they sort of started to ask Native people that we need to start populating the space and making work. So this is just a couple images from an early project that I did called Treaty Card. And the reason I mentioned Heath again was Heath is known as one of the two Europeans who actually created what's called net art. And so this is a net art piece, and what it was you'd go to a forum on a website, and you would fill in some information, and I asked you what your colonized name was and what your real name was, what you really wanted to be called, and a few other things. Now, treaty card's a misnomer. It's only used in Treaty 6 territory mostly, and it's a misnomer, meaning it should be a status Indian card, but in the Treaty 6 area and Treaty 4, I think we say treaty card. So what I was saying in this project, that everyone should have a treaty card, because if any of you have ever seen the treaty medal, it's a British man and an Indian shaking hands. Really, we know that the treaty card or the status Indian card is a leftover from the reserve pass system, when we weren't allowed to leave the reserve unless we had special permission, right? So the thing about that I'm showing you, this man, Danny Gable, is this became kind of like if I had a greatest hit, if I was like a one-hit wonder, this was my one hit. It got shown in so many exhibitions, and almost every single, like there's hundreds of photos, and you can tell exactly where the piece was in the gallery because it looked the back looked the same on every single person. But then I would go at night to sort of make sure there was, no spam happening or the site wasn't breaking down. And these old guys, these old native men started finding the website. They typed in treaty card into a search engine, and they came to my website and started making their own treaty cards. And it just really, this gratitude where you want to cry because you're just so happy. So they showed me, that my work was relevant outside of a gallery and outside of a very small enclave. So I'm just super honored. Never met this man, but pork chop, he's very dear to my heart. So in the net art world, I continued to work for quite a while, and actually I'll just go back to the splash page. I think it's right here. Yeah. There's a word in our language, wāskahikan, and that is something, it's called a prayer cloth, basically. And so this project is like a misnomer. You don't usually say wāskahikan. But so I love making mistakes, and here's a mistake that I made that's now published and part of a project. But basically what this project is, this project honors the Naitauhau family. Joseph Naitauhau's dad was a sweat lodge keeper when he was with us on this earth plane, and the family allowed me to share not share the teachings and not sort of recreate what wāskahikan is, but basically if you go to the About section here, you'll read that I'm just sort of suggesting, maybe we can all realize that even in technology, even in the internet, there's places where we can go just to kind of rethink about life. So basically what you do is you make a prayer. So I'm just going to say, thank you, Mother Earth. And it's in 3 languages. You can do it in Cree, French, and English. So I'm just going to offer a prayer. And what it does is it brings up a flag. And basically you can download the flag and you can keep it on your desktop. And it's just a way to remind you that, spirits are everywhere. Even within technology, they still live there. So for me, that's a feel-good project that I made. And it's always a constant reminder that when we meet people along the way, and like Janine, when you called me your sister, it's true, we don't have throwaway friendships, Like we make friendships for a long time, and they have meaning. Like when I saw you, and I was like, you were a blondie the last time I saw you. So it's really important that we kind of retain and build those family relationships. And this always reminds me of this project. Okay, I'm going to play a song. I have to remind myself what the song is. Oh, I know what the song is. So what started happening was because I'm also a songwriter and a singer, although I have been told by people who've heard me driving in my car singing, don't quit your day job. And I have to yell back at them and go, this is my day job. So I sing, I write songs, and I realized that, I have performance art now, and I have this technology working on the internet, but I still write songs. And I started wanting to come up with ways that I could combine them all. So this is a song, I'm pretty sure this is a song called Indian Spam, and it was a song about how for Native people, spam for us was very different than the spam mail that most people were getting in their inboxes. For us, in our community, spam was, there's some sacred regalia that was found in a garbage. Can anyone identify it? Can anyone help us find who owns it? A joke of the day, here's something funny. So for the Native community, spam was very, very different. It wasn't about drugs and bigger penises and stuff like that, And so I really wanted to honor that fact, and I also wanted to honor the fact that in our community, like I grew up eating spam. I ate a lot of fried spam growing up, and it was a delicacy, like the way you can make it. So I really wanted to honor how, we in the Native community, we know how to take things that other people would consider throwaway, and we know how to honor it and make it a delicacy. So I'll just play, it's a 4-minute song. We'll see if we can get through it. If put your hand up if you don't want to hear any more of it, okay? At any rate, I will also say my mother's sayings are in this song. So there's some, and I played it for her a year before she passed away, and she goes, I used to say things like that. I said, yeah, Mom, these are your sayings. So here we go. Our mama said, you should if you're well fed. Well, that was just her way of saying don't waste food. Quit your belly aching and clean your plate up. Don't go to bed on an empty stomach. If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. As long as we got water, we got soup. Some people like to show off, and others lurk or hide. And some were born to shout their views, broadcasted far and wide. And others, well, they're into jokes, the kind from bathroom stalls. There's high-tech and exclusive forts, passwords and firewalls. Who doesn't want 5,000 friends to CC with spam mail? You're either hanging on the cross, or you're banging in the nails. That was just her way of saying don't waste food. Quit your belly aching and clean your plate up. Don't go to bed on an empty stomach. If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. As long as we got water, we got soup. So come and have some pork and beans, rubber-boo, bullet soup, smoked salmon too, Indian fried bread or moose nose, la galette or Indian tacos, Indian steak, click pram cam, fried bologna, it's all Indian spam, amiskwaciy, wāskahikan, sashkanak, Indian ice cream, and fish cheeks, big bannock scratch, with bear grease, Indian popcorn and neck bones. Come taste why there's no place like home. Now all this talking about food, it's making me remember things like a good man is hard to find, but a hard man is good to find. Beauty is skin deep, but ugly goes right to the bone. Don't ever forget what color your feathers are. Remember, a woman can run faster with her skirt up than a man can run with his pants down. Note, these are all things our mama actually used to say to us. And here's my personal favorite. If you're looking for sympathy, get a dictionary. It's right there between shit and syphilis. Our mama always said, you should if you're well fed. But that was just her way of saying, don't waste food. Quit your belly aching and clean your plate up. Don't go to bed on an empty stomach. If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. As long as we got water, we got soup. I got something to say, and I ain't gonna say no more. As long as we got water, we got soup. Thank you. I think the other thing about the fact that I wanted to start merging some different things that disciplines I was working in, was a sort of a way to acknowledge that in our community as Native people, we're rarely any one discipline, right? We do a lot of things in our family, right? We have to be the person who does the pipe ceremony and welcomes people, but goes out to the powwow, but also cuts the grass, and so we do a lot of stuff, right? And really that's what my practice has been, sort of all over the map because of. But to think about decolonizing the narrative, maybe thinking about sovereignty and our rights as Indigenous people, is also the fact that it's important for us to sound our worldviews, to be able to still have that practice of our languages and our songs. And this is an image from a project where several years ago, it's called Wāskahikan, Songs Because of the Land. And I wandered around Vancouver for several months and just listened to the land, just listened to everything that was there, and created these songs. And this project, this is just an image, but I was basically singing into a Nokia phone, and we had a website, and it was a dedicated website that picked up these little song shards that I would sing. I would also go and sing these little song shards to a lot of the unhoused men and women that were on the street, and we had money and a budget that was great. So I was really subverting that notion of having people come to my concert. I was going out to people and paying them to listen to me sing. So I was very happy about that I could many times help people to get into a shelter for the evening and stuff like that. And the only price they had to pay was just to listen to me sing and talk to them for a little bit. But the thing I started to realize about this project too is that I'm not from the West Coast. I'm not from that land. It's not my territory. And so I really wanted to be there looking at the anarchist philosopher Hakim Bey, and he has this notion of temporary autonomous zones, where you're just temporarily there, and I really was trying to honor that notion of, I'm not here to cause any trouble. I'm not here to have anything bad happen. I want to just be here temporarily and in a good way. And from there, I started to, at around that time, I was also thinking about the fact that I was learning how to write songs, and how can I share that? Because the other thing is, another part of decolonizing the narrative, I suppose, is the fact that when you have a gift in the Native community, it's your job to share that gift, right? That's what you do. So each one of you that are here that are artists, you're using your gift, right? And you have to share it. So I'm just going to play one more song, and this is a song from a project that Janine was mentioning. For a few years, I'm just finishing up now, I've been going into men's facilities, women's facilities, and youth detention centers. So prisons, correctional centers, and youth detention centers, and co-writing songs, because like, as you heard, Indian spam song may not be your type of music, but I know how a song goes together, right? And so I started going into facilities, and in a week's time, with a group of people, we would write a song together. The words would be their words. I would contribute the melody, but the melody would be based off of the cadence of their words. And I would also make sure that the melody was in their key or in their register so that they could sing, and they'd be able to sing their song. And I made music videos, I made VRs, I made a whole bunch of different types of sort of technology-based installations to help amplify the songs. And this is one from Paldojak, a youth detention center that Janine's dad was instrumental in getting me into. I'll just say, I'll play it, but I'll just say you can hear the guys counting from 1 to 100. You can hear it at the beginning and then at the very end. And that's referencing Louis Riel's prophecy that said, "My people will sleep for 100 years, and it will be the artists who help awaken their spirits." So this is from a group of men at Paldojak Youth Detention Center in, it's Oskana, eh? Pile of bones.
1, 2, 3.
I'll just quickly say, you don't get to see any of the guys because, of course, they were all underage. So what I did was I went into a nearby health facility and I got people to sign waivers, and I said, you know, it takes that African saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I said, would you give these young boys four minutes of your time and just listen to their song? And so that's why you'll see it's all of them and not the boys.
4. I don't know, just messing around. I don't know, just holding it down. Smile, accept your situation. You may be locked in a cell. Even if you're locked up, that won't stop you, you'll still rise. So take a moment and close your eyes and learn to free your mind. And you will see you can have freedom all the time. You will see you can have freedom all the time. They can love us, they can hate us, but they're never gonna break us. Don't let the little things break you down. Yes, I'm a mess, I'm so different from the rest. But go ahead and put my smile to test. I love you, my parent, my team. I'm gonna take my happiness to the extreme. Never give up, your destiny could be your dream. Your destiny could be your dream. They can't take away my freedom. They can't take away my voice. They can't take away my happiness. That is my choice. That is my choice. That is my choice. That is my choice.
No matter how good I become, it's like I'm still a little too hurt a song for you. Don't know what else I'ma do. My intentions are true. Just try to make it proud, cause it was hovering on my mind like a cloud. And I can't stress how much I put my best into my education. It's my dedication to you and him. If it's any indication, it's only cause of you and men. Him that I try, it's only cause of you and him that I pray to the man in the sky. The demons try to take that, but I was like, nah, you're never gonna break me. I'ma rise out the dust and lay it down like a royal flush. I'm a proud Cree, I'm allowed to be a smiling guy. Laughter is why we try.
I can speak with honesty and choose who I wanna be. I can't change my course. It is something I must endorse. No one knows my past, and they won't understand the wrong. They may say that I'm weak, but I know I'm strong. They may say that I'm weak, but I know I'm strong. They can love us, they can hate us, but they're never gonna break us. Don't let the little things bring you down. Don't let the little things bring you down. They can love us, they can hate us, but they're never gonna break us. Don't let the little things bring you down. I don't know, just messing around, just messing around. I don't know, holding it down, holding it down. I don't know, just messing around, just messing around. I don't know, holding it down, hold it down, hold it down. 96, barely. 97, 98. 99, 100.
I think the thing that I also started to realize is that when you're going into other people's territories, in the same way that you're going into these facilities and ensuring that these young people and the women and men that I got to hang with and be creative with, that they got to share their stories. It's their story. It's not me saying theirs. I started to get invited to other people's lands. And this is a work from a piece I did in 2016. And I love showing it because it only got shown in Australia. And it's in the land of the Dharawal people, at Campbelltown, current-day Campbelltown, right next to Sydney. And they were massacred, and it was massacred. They were massacred to make way for the farmers so that the farmers could have the land. And one night they were camped, the Dharawal band was camped by a cliff, and the army came in and basically sent them all off the edge of the cliff. Most of them died except for a couple women, a couple children, and they were put into indentured slavery. As you know, there's not the same kind of treaties in Australia. I think there's one gentleman here from Australia here with us. They would be put onto cattle farms, and they would be as like indentured servants on cattle farms. So there was a couple Dharawal people who were left, and there was one old lady who was the person who basically I got to consult with on this project. And so what I did was I used technology. You can see on the ground there's a little camera. It's a little Kinect camera. And what it did was as you went and stood in front of some lights, and in fact, you stood in front of some lights and you looked down on the ground and there was a plinth. And if you looked down at that plinth in red, you would see that you were reading what the piece was about, because this plinth actually lives on that piece of rock, which is out several miles away from the gallery. And so by the time you finished reading that and looked up, the Kinect camera had taken thousands and thousands of images of you and compiled them together. And you were now standing behind the memorial site. And it was a way to say, we need to stand and in solidarity with these histories, we can't forget. But it was also temporal in the way that it wasn't saying that anyone owns that, or owns that territory or wanting to be, that's their territory now because they're now photographed in it. So as you walked away, each second, your images would fade away until you were completely gone. So I did that to honor the Dharawal people and to say to people, we need to stand with each other more often. And then I was invited to create work for a project that's still touring. And it was here actually a couple years ago at the Banff Centre. It's a project called Soundings, or an exhibition called Soundings. And for this piece, the same thing. I went and photographed in the landscape of where the piece was going to be exhibited. This is a rock that's on the edge of Lake Ontario, and then this piece is a rock that's just in the harbor in Vancouver. And I got a person from each of those territories to be the voice for the piece, because that's their place. And this isn't just a photograph. This is actually 8 feet high, 4 feet wide, and about 4 inches thick, and it's foamy. It'd be comfortable to lay on. And this one is the same. This one's about 5 feet long and but same, 4 feet wide. And you actually have to, the way that the audio works is that you actually have to get right on the work to be able to hear the audio. And I wanted to do that just as a way to say, too often we have this notion of don't touch the art, and it's kind of like actually touch the art, you need to really get on this piece of rock. But the other thing about it is you might say, well, you're kind of being proprietary there, you're owning somebody else's image. I wanted to honor the fact that, this is also something we need to look at in decolonizing the narrative, this notion that mobile technology is so pervasive that we can just go anywhere and take photos of anything, right? And we've all got it stored on our cameras, and now it's ours, right? And in these pieces, you've got these huge pieces, and I have to store them and care for them. So it's a way of me saying, I really will care for this now. I'm not just it's not just, here, it's on my phone, I'm not dissing anyone, but, I just wanted to really make a point that there's something that we need to take care of when we're in other people's territories and documenting other people's territories and other people's things. And maybe I'm just going to finish because I've probably talked a blue streak, and I know I live up to what I said. I think I just want to finish off with Oh no, we have to talk about the eels quickly. So speaking, I had one more invitation to go and go into the territory of the Anishinaabe people around Odawa or Ottawa. And I wanted to make a work talking about Chief Teresa Spence. You remember when she did her hunger strike on Victoria Island, and they said, you know, they wanted me to make a piece that was at the place, and so I kind of knew I was going to use that same technology where there's that famous photo of her sitting next to Adam Beach in one photo, and then there's another photo of her sitting next to Justin Trudeau. I was going to make it so that anybody that walked into the gallery, it would look like they were sitting next to Teresa Spence instead of them, and it would be a way of sort of sitting in, or that's another form of protest. Remember, there used to be sit-ins, right? So it was a way to sort of do that. But the curators of this show very curiously started talking to me about eels. And I was like, I mean, I'm from northern Alberta, and I live in Saskatchewan now, and there's no access to fresh or to oceans. So eels, it made no sense to me. I was like, why do they keep talking to me about these eels? What about these eels? But it was like these eels started like coming into my psyche, and I started dreaming about these eels. And then finally I had the serendipity of, I got invited to sing a song at a interspecies communicator conference. So there's people in the world, they're amazing. They talk to beings, they talk to animals and plants and rocks, and they asked me to come and sing a song, and I sang one of my songs. I write drum songs as well. And they were such an interesting group of people, and so I thought about it, and I thought, oh, maybe they'll help me with this eel issue, and so I asked, and one of them came forward and said, yes, I'll help you with your eels. And so I said, so tell me what I need to do, and she said, well, I need to see 2 eyes, and she said, and a maximum 5 questions. And I said, okay, so I really thought about the 5 questions, and the 5 questions, if I can remember them really quickly, they were, will you collaborate with me on this project? If so, how do you want to be depicted? There's many ways that eels look throughout their lifetime. And how do you want me to credit you? And how can I pay you back? Because I like to pay my collaborators when I'm working with somebody. If I've got money, it's their money too. And there was probably there's a 5th question that I'm just not thinking of. So the eel said to me when I said, how do you want to be depicted? They said, show the humans our babies. They said, we notice you humans like babies. Maybe if you see our babies, you'll take some pity on our plight. Because freshwater eels around the whole planet are 96% extinct. So they've dealt with mass extinction. There's not many of them left. And so I made a piece, and I'm not showing you the piece, I just wanted to talk about the eels, because it's really important that we think about this, especially being in a national park, right, with all these beings here. So I was really honored that they agreed. And they were so smart. They said to me, when I said, how do you want me to acknowledge you? I said the word in Anishinaabe for who you are is bimeze, or mize. And they said, why don't you look at all of the human languages around the planet and see how important we are to you humans? And I did. It was so brilliant. I didn't do an exhaustive search, but I think I came up with like 200 words for eel, like in a couple days. So they really wanted to say, look, humans, we're part of you, you're part of us, and so it's a really beautiful piece that I loved getting to show, and a huge honor. And recently I dreamt about the eels. I was crocheting little outfits for baby eels, and so I went, oh, we're not finished with the eels. We still have to do something with them yet. So I'll just finish off, because I know I've probably talked way more than an hour. This is a piece called like TP in Cree. It's called amiskwaciy, which is kind of a play on words. It just means poles that are light, like light in weight. And hopefully this is a piece that we're going to bring here to Banff in a couple years. So if you come around, and I think the reason I wanted to end with this piece is it's also really important that what we do as artists and what we do as Native artists when we dream things. So I dreamt this came to me in a ceremony many, many years ago, and it took me a long, long time to figure out how to make it. And so I think it's just really important for all of us to remember that, when things come to us as visions, that's part of our bundle, that's part of our gift, that's part of the work that we have to do. And so I'll end with that. The piece is a participatory piece, which means it's not a sculpture that stands by itself. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of people there on the ground. So everyone is basically making the teepee together. So it's about how we manifest and make things together and envision things together. So I just want to say kinina skumtana wow, and I think we're going to have some questions. And I'll...
Can I? Okay, awesome. So yeah, you're not done talking yet. We're going to actually move the conversation here, and we'll also be welcoming any stories or questions from the crowd. So you're not off the hook. So if you didn't say something, you got time. Well, first of all, Tiniki, big thank you for the sharing. And for me, what I always learn is not only like new words and language, but those for me also inform values. And I think that is what I always appreciated about learning. When I was young, actually, my family thought it was better that I didn't know Cree because there's assumption that we were going to all end up in residential school. So they thought, well, we want to make it easier for you so you don't get, because you would actually get in trouble and punished if you spoke your language. But I did actually, I'm really good at getting in trouble by cookums. I can understand when I'm getting in trouble. So, I think, rebuilding like each of those have been really important as like medicine that we get back. And so when you shared that Indian spam, that's actually what it reminded me of. Not only my mom, but like cookums, because sometimes you don't realize the things that you're hearing until you're older. And my dad would actually say, that's gourmet steak. You fry up that spam. Yeah. But I just feel like what's really important is that you're always continuously learning and sharing and you're challenging yourself into these new realms of practice. And just wanted to hear a little bit more about what you're doing in the UK. Are you going back there? Because I know that's where we kind of left off when we were together in October for Acne Mustithis.
Yeah, I'm working on a PhD right now at the University College of Dublin, and it's a long process. It's supposed to be much shorter than it's being. We have brilliant people who are winning your awards. Tell us what your award was again. You just told me today.
The Medal of Merit at the University of Halfbreed for my team.
Let's give you a round of applause. Congratulations. Yeah, really important. Really, really important. So. I'm still toiling away at that. What else? I'm trying to stick closer to home. I'm actually working on a project up in Edmonton right now, which is it's my heart project right now. We have this family belonging. It's a spoon cup, so back before there ever used to be cupboards and drawers, our ancestors used to put things in like containers and have them on the cupboard. And there's this one that's from my family, and we don't have many belongings in our family, but this one is a spoon cup that was my great-great-great-grandmother's spoon cup. And if you think of that spoon cup, it heard so many stories in its lifetime, right? So I'm doing a project about the spoon cup, and it gets to live with stories. So it's kind of really nice. I get to go visit aunties and cousins and granddaughters, and we get to tell stories and make art with the family. So yeah, that's what I'm working on.
And that's where you're heading right after this, eh?
That's where I'm heading, tomorrow afternoon, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I was thinking actually, because you mentioned Joseph and your relations, I actually found out through Solomon Rat. We were on a trail, and he's like, did you know that I'm your mushum? And I was like, oh, okay. So then he explained the family tree. And he's like, well, actually, because in Indigenous kinship, everybody's like an auntie, an uncle, a mushum, a chapan. So we don't actually go second cousin removed, auntie, it's just not in our language. So what he told me was that I could actually be your mushum or I can be your uncle, actually, which sounds bad, but it's not. But so he said, well, you can call me Mushum. And by the way, if I'm your Mushum, that means you're also related to Joseph Natauhau. So when you both came for the program, I said, oh, by the way, I heard from Saul that we're related, and then explained the kinship and genealogy, and thought for a moment, oh, okay, yeah, but you can call me uncle. So, yeah, it feels like that's, as Indigenous people, we're always trying to figure out how we're related, and then if we're not, okay, I'm gonna adopt you.
That's it, yeah, you look like a relative of mine, that's it, you're in, yeah. I also wanted to just say quickly too, around the music side of things, all of the songs from when I was working inside, I got gifted some money this year, so I get to make a double album of all of those songs, and so that's on my computer desktop, so I'll make sure you get a copy, so you have a copy of the album, because you have a kinship to those songs as well, so yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Which was actually leading to, the importance of kinship, because I feel like just in what you shared with that first image and how it's informed your practice, just how those values are still, you're nurturing them through your work.
My mom was great. I would come home from doing a performance art piece, and when I was younger, I used to always take my clothes off, right? That was always going to be part of a performance piece. So I'd be telling my mom, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then this happened, and then I did this, and she'd be sitting there smoking. And then she'd go, did you take your clothes off then? No, not yet, not yet. And then I'd keep telling her, and then, did you take your clothes off then? No, not yet, not yet, wait. But yeah, she always knew there was going to be a point where I stripped down naked. So don't be afraid to tell your family about your work there.
Yeah, definitely my mom and my kids are part of my practice. So.
Yeah, I know your mom's featured in your work, which is wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so I am going to open it up to the audience, but I'll share one more little story, because when I was listening to your piece, and I'd have the headphones on, I'd be jamming out in my chair. Thankfully, I wasn't recorded. I probably didn't look as glamorous, just sweaty in the gallery all day. Just kidding. But what it did remind me of was why that was so important, actually, is I got invited to do statement gathering at the Prince Albert Penitentiary. And so it was one of the first times a woman was invited into that penitentiary to be able to take statements. And so my late friend Harvey Tatusis, who was also related to the late Harvey Tatusis, was my partner who would go and gather these stories with me. And he didn't like anyone bringing up Gordon. Everybody talks about my cousin, and actually was a very accomplished chess champion. So he was with me on this trip, and when we went in, because we would start off with a sharing circle, and then we would move into doing private statements. And so it was here that I actually got my nickname, that my family still calls me to this day. But we were in the other room, and they said, just wait, you can come out when we call you. And so after a little while, they got us to stand at the door. And then all of a sudden, I think they're called chaplains that were there supporting, but said, please rise for Lady Canada. And I got so excited. Who's Lady Canada? I was looking around thinking I was going to meet someone really cool. And Harvey elbowed me. You're Lady Canada.
That's still your nickname.
It's still my nickname.
Nice.
So decolonizing the narrative, and then I have Lady Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was something that for me was also like there's humor in how we name people, and there's so much more. So I think for me that what I learned hearing their stories was actually, it was almost like an extension of residential school, what they were experiencing. And to be able to just listen and to hear them out and to take in those stories and then to be able to take their statements, there was like they were giving a medicine bundle. And so when I left, I had all kinds of gifts, keychains, blankets, and I thought these are like the most talented people that I've ever met, because the intricacy of their quilts were so amazing, their wood carvings, their beadwork, and of course me being the curator at the time, oh my God, they're all amazing. And so for me, when I seen your work, it really connected me to that part of my background.
Yeah,
So.
brilliant. Yeah, it's so true, actually. That's the thing I can tell you, is that each and every person that I got to write a song with are just the most amazing beings. You know, what they, not only their life, what they've lived through, but just, you know, the way they would come to things. There's this one song that I've never made a video, but it's called Lightning Scarred Heart. And the intricacy of the wordplay is just exquisite, just astounding. And I was bringing in a musician to act as a co-producer with me, and he's a non-native guy, and he'd always say, you know, you're kind of ignoring these girls, these two girls that have they're really loud and they've got really good voices and their intonation's pretty good. And I was like, yeah, I said, I'm not ignoring them. I said, it's just that there's these really shy ones. And just wait till they finally offer something. And when they finally did offer the words that they wanted, he was just like, oh my God. And I said, I know. If we would have only paid attention to the two women who were kind of extroverts and boisterous, I said the song would have been an "Oh Baby Baby" song, you know. I said, but then we got this point of view, you know, and so it's just really extraordinary beings, and really I got to go sweat inside the men's facility, go into a sweat lodge, and I think that's the biggest honor I've ever had in my life, was that I got to sweat with those men inside there, where they're being held captive, you know, so, yeah.
Yeah, and as a little aside to that space that we're talking about, Paul Dojak, historically the Regina Indian Industrial School was actually on the same plot of land, so even the bricks we found with my late friend, life speaker Noel Starblanket, we actually got invited to go back to Paul Dojak, and they still had those bricks on the land. Yeah. And so as part of how stories were so important is we got the municipal and provincial designation to protect the site. And so what I was often told was not a lot of people knew about that oral history, but the people in Dojak did know that history because they had to stare out at that land all the time. So we were actually able to rebuild fragments of that narrative through the staff and the people who stayed there, because they kept telling stories amongst themselves. Yeah. And so that site is now protected and is commemorated, and there's an organization that I was honored to be able to help form that is still doing that work.
That's right, yeah.
And so, yeah, those stories, so that's what it reminded me of, was that children were still being incarcerated on that land.
And just around that project of writing songs inside, I mean, I encourage the composers, you got to go and do some work. It's amazing work. But there's a Métis songwriter, his name is Burke Jodawin, he lives in Leader, Saskatchewan, but he's doing really well in the music business, and he's agreed he's going to take on the work, because I'm getting old, and he's agreed that he wants to come in, and I'll show him the methodology that I've created on how to work with a group of folks and write a song in 1 week's time and record it in 1 week's time. And so I'm really happy that that gets to continue on, you know, 'cause that's kind of like a dream come true. I mean, how many of us in the room who make work, you know, sort of think about our legacy, what's going to happen next, who's going to take this work further? And so I'm just honored that he's appeared in my life. And we found out we're related too, so yeah. His 3 times great-grandmother is my 2 times great-grandmother, so I'm like, cool, cousin, right on.
So we're probably related to someone in the room.
Yeah.
I did steal one of the mics, but Ali and Tanya, if anyone has any questions, one of them
or
will...
comments, or a story you want to tell because you had to hear all mine.
Yeah.
Or what are you working on? What's exciting in your life? And yeah, what did it remind you of?
Just a comment and huge gratitude. What you're doing in correction centers, etc. It's so profoundly healing, and that you're giving voice in a healing capacity to so many people. could say a lot more, but thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know, I have to say the mortality rate in our communities is high, and for those relatives of ours who are incarcerated, it's even higher. So that's been another thing about that project, is that when somebody's unfortunately loses their life way too early, I'm able to actually give the voice to the family and say, here's your brother or your son or your nephew, here's them singing this song. You know, like that's quite powerful, because you can have an image, but then to know that that's their voice, eh? It's really, really means a lot to me. So thank you. Thank you for.
We have somebody over here.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your practice and hearing about it. I was really interested when you were talking about anarchy and archic impulses in relationship to indigeneity. And I was thinking about decolonizing the narrative and thinking with the nation state and the fact that we need these new models, you know, that we're all searching for new models. And indigeneity exceeds the nation state, the liberal nation state model. And so I wondered if you could just elaborate, like what are those models potentially that we can learn out of indigeneity? Can you say a little bit more about those anarchic creative impulses from within indigeneity, and anything else you want to comment about these other ways of knowing that we might want to recuperate and research right now?
Hey. There's a being in our many of our worldviews, and aside from it being the trickster being, there's also another sort of trait that some people will know, and that's somebody who's sort of called a contrary person, eh? You know, and we all get called that. Oh boy, you're really being contrary right now, eh? So that happens a lot. And but the thing about, I'm always reminded about the contrary beings, is what they're showing us is they're showing us that the moment it becomes about possessions, because if you gave a contrary being something, they would throw it away. And that's why contrary beings always have sort of people who will go with them to things, because it's those people who are like, don't throw the food away. You're going to want to eat that later, you know. But the contrary beings, they tend to sort of divest. Because what they're trying to show us is they're trying to show us that as soon as there's kind of human man-made laws, it becomes exclusive. And as soon as it becomes exclusive, it's going to emit, and it's going to make people not be able to be part of, right? And so that's what they're doing by, you know, even if they show up at a ceremony and they're sort of breaking the rules of the ceremony, they're just reminding us, that, you know, hey, you know, these are man-made rules that can exclude, right? So you accept it from a contrary. You always accept, oh, that's a contrary being. But the contrary being has people who will help them and go, no, that's our supper. We'll have it. I'll gather the supper and we'll eat that later. So I think that's an important thing to think about, you know, that it's not based on the nation state. It's not based on, you know, it's not based on anything. It's that being is just sort of saying, look, you know, as soon as you make rules that are hard and fast rules, and you try and criminalize people for breaking those rules, or you try to exclude them, you know, you're actually not being something that's life-affirming and whole, you know, that holistic and whole. So it's an important kind of thing to think about, you know, yeah.
Yeah, well, and also culturally, like I have my dad, who I mentioned, Jake Windy here, who's from Kausas, is Kokon, and we're backwards, me and my kids. And so how I was described is that there's no wrong way, there's another way, and that our role is to sit on the outskirt of society, and that if everyone is in agreement that you're all going to do something, it's my job to question and to ask why we're doing that. And then that way, if everybody still feels like, oh no, this is what we want to do, then that's okay as well. And, you know, we also were taught to do things, but it was never really explained why we were doing things. So growing up, when I thought, oh, okay, I'll go out in the community by myself without my dad around, and then people would question me, what are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? And then I would say, oh, my dad taught me that. Who's your dad? Jake Windy here. Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, just let her. So I came home and I was like, Dad, I'm getting questioned. I'm doing what you taught me to do. And he said, oh, we're from the clown society. We're backwards. We have to teach people what to do by what not to do. So we do everything backwards. And so they're questioning you because they don't know that about you. And so that taught me in that way. And he said, we just don't tell you why you're doing things. You have to earn that through experience and repetition. And as you earn something, then you get another teaching. And then it's a privilege, every teaching that you get. And so that's probably why I ask a lot of questions. I'm just kidding. But I was taught that that was my role. And it's not any disrespect for how things are. It's just that you need someone to help so that you're not moving towards like a mob mentality is what I was taught. And
and the other thing about that too is if you think of most of our clothing, the buckskin, the way it had fringes coming down the bottom, and shawls, you know, and dresses. Those are survival skills. Those are survival design because, and I'm bringing that up in the same context because in my family, because there was a mix of French as well, in our family, if you got called a frou-frou, you were actually being called a contrary person. And if you think of what that refers to, it refers to that fringe that's hanging off of a jacket or hanging off of a shawl or hanging off of a dress. And as you're walking and moving, that fringe does this, right? And you might just think, oh, it's just some nice design, but it's actually for if you were out in the winter time and it was snowing on you, what happens is the heat of your body is melting that snow. And if it just goes into your clothes, it'll freeze again, and it could be life-threatening. But that fringe, that design of that fringe, it's to wick the water away from your body so that you never freeze. So, and on some level, if you think of the whole notion of being contrary or doing things in a different way, it's actually a survival technique. It's actually a survival tactic. You're gonna survive. So I think that's really important to think about that as well.
Thank you. And also, as you notice, there's 3 kinds of Cree in my family. So if I'm mixed up, it's because we have the Atikamekw Cree, the Woodland Cree, and the Plains Cree, all at war in the same house. So sometimes my brain flips from one to the other. Any more questions, though? Or stories? Oh, we got one in the back. Allie? Just kidding. I could run up too, actually.
She's coming. She's coming. She'll be right there. Put your hand up so
Okay.
she can see you. Yeah.
You're gonna have to send for food and water.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all this wonderful presentation and opening up so much.
Thank you.
So I've come here from Australia, so a lot of things. So I'll just say a few words. Fringe, there is a Fringe festival in Melbourne. So it reminded me of that all the sort of the marginal practices are included in that. It's a wonderful experience for people to be part of Fringe Festival. Anyway, that was a kind of a side comment. But I'm really, really curious about language. Why language? Why spoken language? I'm a visual artist. And in many of my statements, I say, I'm skeptical of words. I don't trust words. And it was only today I knew why I've been saying that. So I'm, in that context, very curious about how come language becomes such a central part of your practice, not only your own language, but English as well.
There's also another artist in our midst who does a lot of work with language. I just want to honor you, Joy Orkant, for your work that you're doing. I think the important thing is that our language was taken away from us. We were not allowed to speak our language. Children in residential school were beaten and murdered and raped and anything else you can imagine that is not healthy or life-affirming for speaking our language, because it was thought to be the devil's tongue. It was also a way that we wouldn't ever be able to be controlled, because if we could speak to each other, that meant that those who are trying to control us can't control us because we're saying something that they don't understand, right? So that's, and I'm sorry, that's a real heavy kind of thing to, hope we're not ending on that. Hope somebody tells a joke or something before we finish. But, so it's really important. And then on another level, the reason our language is really important is that Cree, to say nehio tapsoin or nehiawin, that means our worldview, right? That's our worldview, how we sort of experience the world. But when you say our language, you say nehiawewin, and that weo part is the sounding. So that's the sounding of our worldview, you know? And how profound is that our worldview has a sound? And I think that's the same for every Indigenous person in this room, right? Your worldview has a sound, and it's deeply embedded and engaged with the land where you and your ancestors are from. And that language and those sound shapes come from the land, and they inform you who you are, you know? And they let you know that you're home, and they let you know that you're okay, you know? So you could really see from a colonial point of view how strategic that was to try and say you can't speak your language anymore, because we really just want to take your land, and you know, we want you to be second-class citizens, because that's the other thing too. We were raised to be the cleaners and the servers and the whatever else, the yard help or whatever, you know. So that's my answer. Janine?
Yeah, well, for me, why I say each of the words are like medicine is because the values are so intertwined in them with that understanding as well. But I was always told that each generation also informs language. So sometimes when language is taken and, say, kept distant from a living culture, that even the meanings change over each generation. And so sometimes I've heard people speak in an old tongue, and that's referencing that it's coming from a certain time. But because we are, even as oral storytellers, we're actively contributing to the larger narrative. It's actually not something that's in time or in the past. And often people will hear me say, our teachings are not in the past, we're embodying them and we're living them right now. And as we're sharing them, we're informing as well. And same as how my kids will do the same work. And for language, like when I say values, like I was always taught, you're as good as your word. So it's important that we hold ourselves in high regard, so you can plant good seeds or you can plant bad seeds. That's going to reflect you as a storyteller and how you choose to share. But I was also told that even as because we don't normally point too much because you're directing energy, that your words are also doing that same work, whether we realize it, that we're admitting a power and magic in that way, like the colonial word would be magic, but we're actually putting out intentions. So as people know, I can be very quiet. I'm talking a lot today, but I'm a better listener because I'm always trying to be mindful with what I say. But I learned from trying to translate thought from English to Cree that there's always something lost, because sometimes you just can't get those same values in the English. You can do your best, but I don't think you'll often, until you embody those teachings, then you understand them better. And so I think that for me has been how I learned and why each is a treasure. And I think because it was denied to me in that way at a young age, it was still there though, they spoke to each other. But also Cree in the north is a lot faster than Cree in the south. So everywhere I went, there was all kinds of variations in what they were teaching. And sometimes the same word meant something somewhere else. So there is the responsibility to connect to each of the communities and especially understand where those languages are coming from and how they're informing values is what my dad really instilled in me. And I still humble myself, actually, because my elder, Noel Starblanket, he didn't like being called an elder, he passed, but he told me he learned his language through my dad. And I was talking about teachings and learning, and he said, you know, you have no excuse if it's on the table and you don't grab it, that's your own fault now, because you have a dad who can teach you that. And so that really hit me in the way that I have trappers in my family, foragers, language speakers, and people who are still actively living those lifestyles. But yeah, they do love binge watching Netflix. So we're still taking tools of this that are being introduced to us in that way. So I think it informs me a lot.
I think just the other thing about language, I mean, I think a lot of Native people would agree with you that the word is troublesome, because that's why here historically there used to be that notion of somebody speaking with a forked tongue, right? It was because in English, and I think French might even have a similar thing, where you can say one thing but actually mean something else, you know? Whereas in our languages, when you say us within our language or you within our language, it's very precise. It's you, not them, or it's you, not them, or it's, you know. So our languages have that ability to be extremely precise. And that's why English was seen as kind of like, you can't trust English. It's very...
Yeah, not your work or not any native language, but English itself.
Yeah.
Especially through the experience of colonization.
Yeah.
That is the tricky bit.
Yeah.
That is what's untrustworthy.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. And what my mom taught me was, because everything's a tool and how we look at it really informs our attitude. She said, well, you know, the one thing is that we learned how to talk to each other from nation to nation and around the globe. So even though she wanted me to now she wanted me to learn my language as I was older. But she said that was the benefit. And she said, actually, in sign language was Indigenous, because that was how we were communicating before. But she said, now we have the tools to talk to each other, but we still have the responsibility to learn our own. And so I think, because I always quote my mom.
Me too.
Yeah, but that's what she taught me, was that is really important, is what do we learn from it? So for me, getting into film was controversial because, you know, I had to take the responsibility of what I can share, what is consented but not to be shared, what is just for Janine, and hold my integrity. So consent is really important as well in terms of what we can share.
And so I'll just tell a joke because, you know, it's heavy. So here's a joke. If you know the answer, shout it out. What's the Indian definition of a vitamin? Someone comes to your door and you vitamin. just to end a little lighter.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your time and coming out.